Let's go out to your neck of the woods.
Please.
Soldier Field in Chicagoland. 41-13 is your final. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish upend the Wisconsin Badgers, Dan. This was a close game most of the way. It was 13-10 with about 14 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But the ensuing kickoff is run back 96 yards from Chyrst Tyree, who Mama H, I was watching with her, immediately screams out because he's wearing number 25 like Rocket Ishmael. She immediately screams out, "That's like the Rocket, that's like the Rocket." We're jumping around. We're all excited. But that was the spark for this Notre Dame team. Now, they didn't necessarily do it with their offense. We can talk about that separately. But at least on special teams with that Tyree play, and then defense, especially in the secondary, 2 pick sixes to close this game out to eventually widen that margin, and I think make it look like a little bit more of a beating than it was. I will say this about Notre Dame, and then I'll shut up and let you talk for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I know Wisconsin does not exactly have an electric offense.
You should be talking for a few minutes. This is your team, and the game that you picked completely incorrectly. You should talk it through.
I took the points. Excuse me. I took the points. I did think Wisconsin would win. But eventually this line ballooned up to 6.5, which was a lot. That felt like a lot. Wisconsin does not have an electric offense by any stretch. But even with that being said, this was a quantum leap forward for Notre Dame defensively, because they've given up a ton of big plays this year. They've looked out of sync for a good chunk of the season. 5 turnovers for Graham Mertz, 4 picks, 1 fumble. Wisconsin held to 1 of 13 on third downs. They were just 18 of 41 passing. Again, I understand we're not talking about, a Mike Leach offense here, which is just all gas, no brakes. But nonetheless, this was a big deal for Notre Dame, the fact that they were able to hold down Wisconsin in the manner that they could and did, and then get some points on defense. I was really feeling pretty good about this, knowing that they're going into a tougher part of their schedule with teams like Cincinnati and others on the schedule.
Mike Leach's offense, for the record, was not all that good yesterday. There were plenty of breaks within that offense to be
Mike
found.
Leach's Texas Tech offense.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, this is a game between 2 quarterbacks who are substandard. They are not quarterbacks capable of leading probably top 10 teams. I don't know if we've ever seen any evidence of Graham Mertz in that regard. I know Wisconsin's offense and philosophy in general was, I saw Ari Wasserman tweeting about how, Wisconsin seriously needs to look inward and, this is their identity, whatever, but they're going to be games like this. And Paul Chryst's record against the better teams Wisconsin has played these past few years.
Yeah.
Not only do they not win, they don't even cover. They've come up flat more and more. And I don't think they need to change anything dramatically. I just think it's possible, and it walks an awkward line that things need to be tweaked. The offensive line isn't where it was. Running back isn't where it was these past few, decade, whatever you want to call it. I know they've had years where, they didn't have Monty Ball. They didn't have, Jonathan Taylor tailback. But I just don't think they have guys to mount a top 10 team. At least the offense is half of it. And similarly, it can be said of Notre Dame that their offensive line has taken a significant step back from where it was these past few years. And, making the change at offensive line coach, 2 years ago, has finally, the evidence has mounted that this is not a cohesive unit. They're beat up. Quarterback recruiting has been okay, but if you're left with Jack Coan trying to compete against Wisconsin and not, just running for his life for a good chunk of this game, that these are teams that are not fielding top 10 caliber squads, and that's okay.
Coan was fine.
He was fine. Saying he was running for his life, though.
He was fine in this game, and that wasn't his fault.
Right,
he was
totally
fine in this game. He actually ended up getting hurt.
Yes.
And because Tyler Buckner had a hamstring injury, Drew Pine took over. And Drew Pine's a little undersized. He's like 5'11". He's from Connecticut. They talked about it on the broadcast. Dare I say a little bit of Baker Mayfield in him?
You dare say the third string Notre Dame quarterback has some NFL qualities to him, sure.
A little bit of Baker Mayfield in him. He came in, he threw a touchdown. I thought looked pretty good. Gave them a little bit of a spark on offense. Notre Dame's in a different spot, though, offensively than Wisconsin. I agree. Wisconsin doesn't have dudes. I don't know who's going to frighten me on the Wisconsin offense. Notre Dame has guys. They're trying to figure out how to use them, right? Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree can't run as well as they'd like because the offensive line is in shambles. Mm-hmm. Jack Coan is not necessarily the guy that they want in there if they're going to have to throw the ball 50 times a game. But if he can develop some of those weapons outside of Michael Mayer, if Kevin Austin steps up, if Avery Davis continues his rise, if some of these other weapons that they have out wide continue to improve, the offense is in a much, much different place than Wisconsin. So I feel like on the whole, if they can figure out that line, they're going to be in a much, much better spot. Perhaps that's the most obvious statement in the world, but they need to get the line sorted out, and it seems like the skill talent is there. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Coan. I don't think the injury is too severe, but if he can't go, maybe Buckner will be healthy next week. We see more of him, or Drew Pine again, who, again, for his part, looked okay. They do have Cincinnati, though. And Cincinnati, I think, is a different breed of team. We'll talk about that on the Wednesday preview. On the Wisconsin side, they've got Michigan next week.
They do.
And we'll talk about Michigan in their game against Rutgers, but Wisconsin's in a spot here, man. They've got Michigan, they've got Iowa on the schedule later this year. If this is the version of the Badgers that we're going to get, don't count out Nebraska, don't count out freaking Rutgers. It just wasn't the kind of showing that you feel great about if you're a Wisconsin fan. And finally, Brian Kelly, by the way, the now winningest coach in Notre Dame football history.
I saw that.
Passed Nate Rockby with 106.
It should be mentioned, though, that Notre Dame was playing against one of probably the best 5 or 7 defenses in the country. It's a tall task to score a ton of points with, sustained offensive drives or explosive plays on offense against Wisconsin's defense. All credit should be given to Wisconsin's defense in terms of their own ability. Notre Dame's defense is a little bit more gettable, I think. You look at what Florida State was able to accomplish, even Toledo at times, Purdue. there are teams that have moved the ball against this Notre Dame defense.
It is gettable.
Yeah,
they have looked better the last 2 games. There have been moments now where it seems like they're starting to put it together, and was impressed by the secondary again. Graham Mertz is not Joe Montana,
no,
but I thought the secondary played really, really well yesterday, and there aren't a whole lot of teams in the schedule that are going to be able to throw for 400 yards or 300 yards or even 200 yards against you. But just to have that defense playing at a better level, I think elevates the ceiling for this team in a wide open year.
Hey, thanks for watching. Consider, if you haven't, subscribing to the channel and hitting that little bell to be alerted, and listening to the podcast at solidverbal.com.